I'm Sharon, I am 46 and I am a mum of 4 children. And during COVID, I had got my vaccines and I was working away and not realising what was going on. I was in my social work placement and struggling to breathe, going to the doctor and getting treated for asthma. Blue lighted at the hospital twice and giving me asthma treatment. And then my GP in the April kind of was like, something's still not right. So she did a D-dimer, which then showed up that I had clots in both my lungs. And then, so I was put on treatment for that. But what happened then was, still wasn't getting better. And I kept going back saying, I can't breathe, I'm struggling. You know, I can't even walk across the hall to the bathroom. So she had set me, it was in September, she set me into hospital thinking I had unstable angina. And that's where they figured out that I had heart failure. So it was like a whole long journey just to even find out what was going on. And then found that I had to go for lots of tests. So I had the angiogram and it was showing that my arteries were clear, but they had done an echo and they realised that my heart function was down to 40%. And then after that, it took, I think it was like a couple of months before I got my CT, and it was confirmed then that I had myocarditis that had been responsible for everything. And then I also have non-ischemic cardiomyopathy. So it's just like a whole roll of stuff. I was very scared. I remember being told I had heart failure. I was very isolated. I was on my own. I had a lovely gentleman who also was diagnosed with heart failure the same day on the ward. And we had promised we'd meet up after and, you know, support each other. And then his wife had messaged me to tell me that her husband had passed away. So it was like, it was mind-wracking. You know, I Googled and it was saying 5 years, and I'm looking at my wee boy at that time and he was only 6, 7, and, you know, and he was saying, Mummy, please don't die. You know, so we were going through quite a roller coaster. I had to come off my degree and I'd been off work for a year and a half. They wanted me to retire on ill health at that stage because they felt that it was taking longer than should be. But me being me, stubborn, refused, got back to work in June 23 and then finally got back onto my degree last January. So, but at that time I just was like, what am I going to do? My whole job role changed, my whole family dynamics changed, where I was looking after my son and I didn't know how to dress him because I didn't have the energy. You know, my children were taking on that caring role. My husband was having to help me shower because even having a shower, you know, and there's still days like that. There's still days where the fatigue is so heavy that, you know, the other day I had to dry my hair, something so simple, but the energy of just holding your arms up. So I think at that time there was that fear. Do I start making arrangements, you know, and I start talking about my death and what I wanted and how I wanted my children to be supported and how I didn't want to be waked at home like the Irish tradition. So it opened up a lot of conversations and a lot of fear. Co-founding Heart Failure Warriors was it was a new way of living. It was trying to find the positives in that negative. You know, when I came out of hospital, because there was no supports, no nothing, and I was reaching out to every organisation saying, is there any support, is there anything? So then I met up with Nicole as part of the chest, heart and stroke. We were doing a walk. And it was just the two of us as the young ones, you know, and then there was another lady who's a part of our group now. But we had a good laugh because, and it sounds awful laughing, but we were laughing because we were there, as we would call silver surfers, the older people with the grey hair. It's maybe not the right term, but it was more that they were flying. I mean, they were so fast, and me and her were trailing. We could hardly walk the length of ourselves. And like, we were just talking to each other, and I was like, God, my legs feel so heavy. And Nicole's like, oh, so does mine, you know. So we started realizing that, you know, the symptoms were similar, and, you know, and we found, because chest, heart and stroke put us two together, we found a lot of strength in each other as being young and having children and stuff. So Nicole had asked me would I want to come along and find out about just starting up a group. At that time we were talking about a peer support group. And I was like, absolutely, you know, it was just something that we could give back and maybe help somebody else find the right path. I think the hardest parts for me was being a mum and trying to explain that, you know, I was different. I wasn't able to do what I used to be. I think, you know, we have a lot of education to do on people. On one occasion, I was walking across the road, and my son had said, you always called me slowpoke because it was so slow. And this guy started shouting profanities at me because I was going slow, and was really, really rude because I was too slow crossing the road and he wasn't impatient. And only from my friend that day, because I was mortified, I didn't know what to do. She used a few choice words, but I remember coming away thinking, you know, I'm okay whenever my friend with me, she has my back. So I think that was one of the hardest things, was realising that nobody could see it. You know, people see me as young and they were like, they just made assumptions. And that was the hardest thing. Returning to work was very hard. It was slow, it took me a while to get back to work. And then I had worked with people with disabilities, so I could no longer do the job that I had done. So I've been waiting redeployment and finding the right role for me. And I think that was very challenging because, again, people are coming in and you're sitting in an office and you're the same pay as them, and they're looking going, oh, what are you doing here? Are you just like a secretary now? Are you this, you know? And I used to be thinking, I feel so useless because I couldn't do the job I used to do. So I think that accepting, I think that was my hardest part, was accepting that this was a new me. I won't be able to do them big long walks with my children, you know. I won't be climbing any hills or doing any of the mad stuff, but I needed to kind of pace myself. So I think too, we need to learn people the importance of reserving their battery and listening to their body and slowing down, taking it easy. It means so much because I find that the more voices we have, the more we are amplified. And this is the reason why, as a charity, we have wanted to look at educating people, but it's particularly in secondary schools, because we find that, you know, educating the younger generation is going to help bring on more talk about heart failure, more talk about heart disease, and even taking away them stereotypes, you know, because when people hear heart disease or they hear heart failure, they're thinking it's an old person, and young people don't get that, you know. So we want to change the look of it, and we want families to be able to say, well, this is what I have experienced and I would like to make a difference. And we're seeing that a lot in our groups, that people are coming and saying, you know, this happened to me and, you know, I don't know what to do. And us being able to say, well, you know, you can link in with Disability Action for support getting back to work, or you can link in with this one. So it means so much just to kind of give that something back. And I know our members are finding it so helpful with them tough, because they're like mountains here at that time, you know. They're just newly diagnosed and they feel so isolated, and not knowing that there is a whole support network out there. I have always been a go, 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 go. I'm always doing stuff. And even now I'm working, I'm studying, I'm doing the charity. But that's who I am. But I have started listening to my body, where at the weekends I know that my body's saying, done, that's enough. So it is taking that day to rest. It's like, you know, having to say no to people. And I think it's always hard to say no to people who have always expected you to jump and do everything. So I think it's important that everybody learns that when your body's saying it's tired, take heed, because when that is ignored, which I have done on quite a few occasions, you hit a wall and you feel physically sick and you just can't do anything and you're off your feet for a few days. So it's about, I've learned from our cardiac rehabilitation about the importance of preserving my battery. So making sure that my battery lasts the whole week. And that's something that I've had to do. So I know in the evenings when I go home, it is an early night, it's into bed. I might not be sleeping, but I'm still resting. So I think it is very important for people to kind of remember to do that, you know, but definitely keep remembering to say no. Don't be always jumping to everybody else, and that's a hard thing to do. What's kept us going is the voices of our members, listening to them and their stories, and the amount of them that would actually say, just coming along, having that chat and a cup of tea, and somebody actually understanding what they're feeling. You know, that kind of, I'm not a hypochondriac, to know these symptoms are normal, you know, are very important for a lot of our members. So I think, yes, I would say for our members, they're what keep me driving, because they are saying is, you know, you're doing a good job, you're helping us, you know, and we are fighting now to try and bring in more supports and more, cut down the postcode lotto, that everybody has the same support when they leave hospital. They're not leaving hospital without information, and they're not relying on Dr. Google, which were the things that we all did. So I want them to get the right information at the right time, and I don't want it to be crammed on somebody. So I think that's what's getting me through, is knowing that we're going to bring a positive change to people so that they can actually move forward slowly and begin to maybe accept too their new diagnosis of heart failure, because it's very hard as a person to admit that you have a disability. So I think, you know, and that's their first step to recovery. So it is about us bringing that support along the way.